I am pleased to welcome you all to what we established as an annual event since 2019 exactly. Our mission, ever since from the beginning, is to provide all attendees with the most informative and knowledgeable experience possible. This is why this forum is, in my book, significant as one of the initiatives that highlights the roles of Arab women in science journalism, as well as sheds light on the reality of Arab women and their achievements in the field of science, health, and technology. The forum also identifies the challenges that may hinder their involvement in scientific media and assuming leadership positions. And I hope this forum will make a mark with particular reference to this point.
This very much helps enhance a wider and a deeper public knowledge and appreciation of women in science, solidly establishing women as role models and role models that are inspirational to younger generations of girls, but also boys, encouraging these younger generations to continue a long, but at times challenging tradition of women's impactful contributions to science. So the forum will play a crucial role in that.
As we gather here, the urgency of addressing climate change looms larger than ever, making the role of science journalists important in bridging the gap between complex scientific findings and public understanding. COP28 became a microcosm of the global media landscape, where professionals with varied expertise converged to shed light on the multifaceted challenges and solutions presented by climate change. It highlighted the importance of collaboration and the role of journalism in creating a more informed and interconnected world. What was the role of women science journalists on site? So the challenges we face in the realm of climate change demand diverse perspectives, innovative solutions, and a collaborative effort or collective effort. Women science journalists bring a unique and invaluable contribution to this discourse. The storytelling prowess, analytical skills, and the ability to distill complex scientific jargon into accessible narratives make them key players in driving awareness and influencing policy. We must recognize the resilience, tenacity, and expertise that women science journalists bring to the field. They navigate through the complexities of climate science, policy interseries, and the human stories behind climate impacts with grace and precision. Their reporting not only informs the public, but also holds those in power accountable. In a landscape where the impact of climate change are often felt disparately across genders, the narratives crafted by these women journalists that you can discover via their articles or reports or other documents not only highlighted the scientific aspects of the challenges, but also delved into the human stories, particularly those of women who are affected. The reporting went beyond statistics and data, capturing the resilience of women in the face of environmental adversity, as well as their innovative contributions to sustainable solutions. The stories told by science women journalists became a powerful tool for amplifying voices that are sometimes marginalized in the broader discourse on climate change. Moreover, these journalists served as advocates for gender exclusivity within the field of science journalism itself, breaking barriers and inspiring the next generation of female reporters. Their presence and influence at COP28 underscores the importance of diverse perspectives in addressing the complex issue related to the climate change.
So women's voices have been historically underrepresented in the practice, reporting, and representation of the sciences. So for instance, if you look at very simple statistics from the National Science Foundation, it shows that women make up only 28% of scientists in the US, and a third of these are non-white scientists. The figure is actually a lot better in the region. So women represent 57% of STEM graduates in the MENA region. That we can see that figure changes slightly once they go to the workforce. So even though they represent 57% of the graduates, they only represent 40% of STEM workforce. But still, that figure is significantly higher than other international figures. So even though women are in the sciences and they have a very strong presence in the STEM field, their voices are not as heard in the media when it comes to science communication and science journalism. So according to the Global Media Monitoring Project, only 19% of experts quoted in science and health stories are women. Traditionally, women have been neglected in medical research, and the conditions that affect women are chronically understudied. So for instance, cardiovascular disease is a #1 killer in many countries, including the US, but about a third of participants in clinical trials for new treatments are women. So we can see where the problem is. And we can see why it's important to have women in the field of science journalism, so that they're able to better highlight the role that women play in the sciences, and that they're able to better highlight the issues that are of particular importance to women that are not very widely talked about. For everyone, we all juggle different roles, but I think specifically for women in fields that are demanding, like the sciences or journalism, we need to do a whole lot of juggling. So just to put things into a bit of context, 30% of Egyptian households are supported by women. I don't know the statistics for the rest of the Arab world, but I expect similarities. And yet, a survey that the UN Women conducted shows that 87% تقريباً of Egyptian men and 77% of women believe that caregiving and house chores should fall solely on women, just on women. And this puts things into perspective, because we're out there in the workplace, we're earning income, and at the same time, we're expected to do the traditional roles that we've been doing all along anyway. And so we're always struggling to sort of juggle multiple hats.
I really wish that as science journalists we were focused more on, we gave more more attention to the social sciences and what the research is saying, and you know, how it impacts day-to-day life. And I think that's really important. It's not happening enough. It's absolutely not happening enough, not that I see. If you have a diverse workplace, you know, with people of different backgrounds and different genders, and it allows people to function better in the workplace, but also in our field as journalists, it also allows for more diverse coverage of topics and issues. I was thinking that as science journalists, we actually want to find these female scientists to interview, because we're very aware of that lack of balance between the interviewing men and women. But the problem is we find it very difficult to find the women who would actually speak with us. And I think some of it has to do with the confidence. Some of it has to do with men might not be as concerned about how they portray themselves to the media as women might be. And so it's not just shyness, but it's also a little bit of lack of confidence, not in themselves, but in the media. And so it's, I absolutely 100% agree with what Busaina said, is that maybe we can have some sort of a role in maybe training female scientists, giving them the skills that they need in order to be able to communicate better through the media. She's asking if you're passionate about something, I think, and then you lose that passion because of the pressures you feel. Yeah. I have been through that experience. Is that because I'm in the phase after the World Conference of Science Journalists, when we organized it, it was so incredibly difficult for me that I thought I lost my passion for science journalism. And I thought that was the end of my career, because I'd lost it that badly. And but what saved me was the network of journalists that I had around me, and that I had such an incredibly strong network of friends who really supported me as Nadia, not just as a journalist, but as a person. and that they were able to give me the kind of support that I needed to give it back to me. And they did it in the right way. I had one of my colleagues basically gave me work, and she gave me the kind of work that I liked doing, and she gave it to me in pieces, so that I kind of she kind of just gradually pulled me into it again. And that was my saving grace. I realized I just absolutely love doing this, and I'd forgotten.
يعني ظني انه محتاج دعم كبير من يعني مكان عمل داعم، اسره داعمه، زوج داعم. الحقيقه يعني ما انا في الفتره الاخيره بقالي 5 سنين ارمله ومسؤوله عن بيت وعن اسره وعن بنات. هم بقوا اكبر شويه من انهم اطفال، لكن الحقيقه انه دي مرحله تانية حسستني انه لا، لما تبقى الاسره داعمه ماما ممكن تقعد مع البنات شويه، انا اقدر اسافر، اقدر اروح السيشن بتاعتي، اقدر اروح انترفيوز، اقدر اروح ايفنتس وهكذا. البنات داعمين ليا برضو، هم مهتمين ان مامتهم تفضل in her own career يعني وكده. فالحقيقه انه السبورت من مكان العمل ومن الاسره ومن المجتمع اللي حواليكي هو ده اللي بيخليكي تسرفايفي وتكملي يعني. وظني كمان انه دايما كنا بنسال، معرفش يا نادية، انا عارفه انك بتشاركيني ده، دايما هو انتوا تشتغلوا ايه؟
My role of staying in the lab, although it's very, very important, but I wanted to go beyond that. I really wanted to share science. And I always felt that there is some sort of barrier between people who work in the lab and what the general audience want to hear. There is an issue of confidence that we have to admit it, and it's not related to the capability of the person. It's more about women maybe not having the right place to be in, or that encourage them to speak out.
And this reminds me of an experience I used to have when I had a male colleague and we traveled together and we'd meet scientists from different universities, especially in the Arab world. And whenever we'd sit in a meeting, I would be the only woman there, and nobody would direct their speech at me. It's always directing the speech at him. And they talk to him, and then I started talking and I started sounding like, well, she might have something to say. And then they started recognizing that, I matter as well. But it's always that. And if you don't have that resilience in you, that, you know what, it's fine, it's not personal, this is just the culture. And, by time they will realize that, I matter as well.
So climate change presents some unique challenges and risks to women. And increasingly as a result of this, gender has been introduced into international discussions and policy to help ensure that the unique challenges are effectively addressed. And of course, the media plays a critical role in communicating these complex issues around climate change and its impacts, supporting climate literacy among affected communities, and for our purposes, also ensuring that the voices and needs of women are being heard.
The Arab region emits only about 5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, but it will be the region most affected by climate change. It has clearly started to suffer from the effects and impacts, especially long periods of drought, increased desertification, water shortages, loss of ecosystems, and increased dust storms. However, awareness of these changes and what needs to be done is still limited in the region, and media coverage is very far from enough. Arab journalists have a key role in educating the public about what awaits the region as a result of climate change, about international efforts to combat it and mitigate its effects, and what governments, institutions, and citizens must contribute to this international effort. It's internationally recognized that women are more likely than men to be affected by climate change. In many regions, women bear a disproportionate responsibility for securing food, water, and fuel. During periods of drought, they work harder to secure their resources for their families. This puts added pressure on girls who often have to leave school to help their mothers. And it is not just women in rural areas. Globally, women are more likely to experience poverty and to have less socioeconomic power than men.
I would like to quote here Susan Chomba, who's a program manager at World Resources Institute. She says, the way climate is seen in the world is very much from a masculine perspective, because 12% of the world's top climate scientists are women, just 12%. And fewer than one are in Africa, which is the continent most affected by climate change.
مهم كمان إن أنا أعتمد على توظيف الوسائط السمعية والبصرية، لأن زي ما قلنا الناس وقتها قليل، اهتمامها بقضايا تغير المناخ والبيئة في المنطقة العربية محدود جدا، وبالتالي لازم أجذب انتباه المشاهد أو القارئ بتاعي. فما اعتمدش بس على النص، لكن ممكن أوظف الوسائط السمعية والبصرية زي الانفوجراف، زي الفيديو، زي الصور، زي حكايات الناس، علشان أقدر أجذب اهتمام القارئ بتاعي. كمان من النقط المهمة إنه لازم الصحفيين يراعوا إن القصص اللي بيكتبوها مناسبة لمجتمعاتهم المحلية. يعني أكيد من المهم إن أنا أعمل توعية وأكتب عن قضايا تغير المناخ على المستوى الدولي، لكن يفضل إن أنا ألاقي زاوية أكتب بيها مناسبة لمجتمعي المحلي وتهم الناس اللي بيقرولي في بلدي، علشان الناس يحسوا أكتر إن هم مرتبطين بالقضية دي، ويحسوا إن تغير المناخ بيأثر بالفعل على كل حاجة في حياتهم.
كمان عندنا نظرة في الدعم المادي للقصص المعمقة، علشان نقدر ننتج قصص فيها عنصر الإبداع، فيها فيديوهات، فيها مالتي ميديا، فيها سفر، ففيها تكاليف. فبالتالي النوعية دي من القصص بتبقى محتاجة لمنح ودعم للإنتاج. والنوع ده من المنح والدعم برضو هو مازال مش متوفر بكثرة، خاصة على النطاق العربي. يعني ممكن تبقى فيه فرص على المستوى العالمي، بس هنتكلم عن التحديات اللي ممكن تبقى بتواجه الصحفيين عندنا في المنطقة إن هم يفوزوا بالنوع ده من المنح أو يقدروا يحصلوا عليها. كمان عندنا فكرة التخصص المهني لسه مش منتشرة بقوة. يعني فكرة إن احنا نشوف عدد الصحفيين اللي متخصصين بس في قضايا المناخ على مستوى الوطن العربي، هنلاقي إن العدد لسه مازال قليل. فكرة التخصص دي مش متاحة. كنا دايما بنتعامل مع البيئة إن هو ملف فرعي ومش رئيسي، ما بيتصدرش عناوين الأخبار، ما بياخدش نفس الحيز من الاهتمام. فبالتالي ما كانش صحفيين كتير بيتشجعوا إن هم يبقوا متخصصين بس في ملف المناخ. يمكن يبقى تحت مظلة أوسع إن هو صحفي علمي أو صحفي متخصص في شؤون البيئة. كمان عندنا زي ما اتكلمت هدير في البداية الحاجة للإبداع والابتكار في طرق السرد، إن احنا نبدأ نخرج عن النمطية في عرض قصص المناخ اللي هي سواء هنتكلم عنه من منظور علمي أو نتكلم بطريقة جافة. ما نربطش الأحداث بقصص ونبسط ونستخدم مالتي ميديا وغيرها من عناصر الإبداع والابتكار في السرد اللي بتتطور سنة عن سنة. وبيبقى فيه يعني لو تابعنا اللي بيحصل على المستوى العالمي هنلاقي إن في تطور كبير حاصل في السرد مؤخرا. حتى كان في معرض فني اتعمل في الأردن بيعرض نتاج لتعاون ما بين صحفيين استقصائيين وفنانين، عملوا مجموعة من التحقيقات الاستقصائية وبدأوا يمثلوها بطريقة بصرية ومعروضات فنية، واتعملت في معرض فني علشان يبسط أكتر للناس طريقة الحكايات اللي هم بيحكوا عنها والنتائج اللي توصلوا ليها، ويدي كمان منظور مختلف وبعد جديد للنتائج اللي الصحفيين طلعوا بيها لما اتعرضت من منظور الفنانين. فاحنا طول الوقت محتاجين ندور على العنصر الجديد دوت، على الإبداع، على الابتكار، علشان نشجع الناس إنها تهتم بالقضايا المناخية وتتفاعل معها بشكل أكبر، ويبدأوا يبتكروا الحلول كل واحد على مستوى المجال اللي هو متخصص فيه.
I have a couple of figures that or numbers that I would like to discuss. According to a recent UNESCO report, 57 of the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics graduates in Arab countries are women. So these figures show that we are currently witnessing a total change among the graduates in the STEM schools.
I'm going to share some experiences in communicating science, specifically to policymakers, given that policymakers in many instances are not necessarily scientists themselves and are members of the public that may not have the scientific background. And so I will start first by an example, a global example from my work in the United States. In this experience, and in many instances, I was the only young scientist, but the only female in the room with, as my peers mentioned on the panels, in a room filled with older white men. It might be an intimidating scenario given the age and sex. However, the nature of the message delivered, really I found throughout my experience to be key. There were instances where I was more prone to dressing like men, like Dr. Maya Nicholas said, but I learned that my message speaks louder than any of those tools that one might employ to try and fit in. And so we communicated the science in a way that was simple, that was understanding the audience that we are talking to, a simple message, a message that translates into actual policy. These were my takeaways from this experience. It was always the message. If you have the evidence base and you have a strong message to give, people will eventually listen, regardless of your gender. If you stay on message, people will stop to listen. It gets less with time. You get the experience. You get to be known amongst peers and other experts. And so this gets less by time. But certainly at the beginning of my career, there was always that a bit dismissive and the need to demonstrate competency before people would take you seriously. I would say in my situation, I would have to emphasize it, provide the evidence, provide support from other members, preferably being male members, to support the evidence that I put forward. So being backed up by my boss, who was a white, older American, obviously assisted in my earlier stages until your message is delivered and people verify the science behind it, then you start gaining the respect. So there's an extra step there that I feel women have to do, is a need to prove competency first, while this is not necessarily the case with males in the similar domains. The cultural stereotypes and biases, but I would say that it is also global. It is not just in Egypt. There is the notion that STEM is predominantly a male field. I am, however, lucky today because in the Institute of Global Health and Human Ecology, we have a decent ratio of males to female, but it wasn't always the case, as I was mentioning. And an important challenge here that could be both a challenge and a tool for success is my peers. I think it is very important for me to get the support of whether my colleagues at NIH or my colleagues at the World Bank. Specifically, I'd like to highlight my female colleagues. And it's not always the case that females push each other forward in the STEM. I'd like to emphasize the importance of that in the success and in the outreach to encourage more females to enroll in STEM. I think it's important to see the support that we can give each other.
I have a daughter who is at a school age here, and I don't think she perceives in any way that there should be any problems that prevent her from being a scientist or a researcher or working in STEM field.
أتمنى أن التوسعة في المنتديات اللي لها علاقة بالتشابك بالبحاث العلميين العرب يتسنى لنا التعرف أكثر عدد على البحاث المهتمين في مجلات ذات اختصاص.
Hello, well, just want to thank everybody for attending as well as participating and those who put this forum on the technical side of things. Of course, after 6 long hours, I'll try and be brief. I have the unenviable task of trying to distill 6 hours of very interesting discussion into a few minutes. So I'm just going to read from my notes. The keynote speaker, Dr. Noah Beled, discussed the importance of urgently addressing climate change, which creates a serious need for competent science journalists in the Arab region. As a result, Noah stressed the importance of supporting science journalism in the Arab region through proper training and novel pathways towards science journalism at the university level to ensure essential information regarding science initiatives are accurately and effectively conveyed to the public. In the initial panel, Women in Science Journalism, the group discussed the myriad of challenges that women face in the male-dominated field of science and conveyed effective methods to overcome these barriers, which includes a strong network of colleagues, mentors, and family. Although the MENA region is faring well regarding the number of women in the STEM workforce as opposed to the West, women's voices are still underrepresented as authorities in science and science journalism. The myth of women not being good in science is reinforced by culture and society. Thus, the most effective means to challenge and to change this incorrect notion is for the inspiration to come from the home and from family. Moreover, the field of science in schools also needs to focus on female scientist role models as opposed to the traditional role models, which are almost entirely men. Thus, increasing the ranks of Arab women in the fields of science and science journalism in the MENA region needs to be maintained. Further, there is a serious need to bridge the gap between women who are underrepresented and men who are overrepresented in science leadership positions. During the second panel, Gender and Climate Change, the group examined how women shoulder an unequal burden regarding climate change, particularly in economically disenfranchised parts of the world. In many regions, women are charged with securing food, water, and fuel for the families. This often affects daughters who are forced to assist their mothers at a young age, which mitigates their chances to pursue an education. According to Hadid, only 15% of climate scientists are women, and just 1% of those are in Africa, which is the continent most severely affected by the issues of climate change. This needs to be addressed. The aforementioned issues are compounded in those regions affected by conflict. Of the 25 countries most affected by climate change, 14 are in conflict zones, which includes many in the MENA region. As such, science journalism must effectively and captivatingly convey the serious issues of climate change to initiate more substantial change to address the aforementioned issues. It was determined that very little detailed information regarding the specific impacts of climate change upon women is currently available, which indicates a serious need to investigate this particular issue through surveys and other scientific means. In the final and third panel, which we just listened to, the panel began with Ashraf Amin calling attention to a recent UNESCO report that indicated 50% of STEM graduates in the MENA region are women. Despite these encouraging numbers, more needs to be done to ensure women achieve in the fields of STEM. Dr. Fayrouz conveyed her experience regarding some women who, in an attempt to be taken seriously in the male-dominated fields of STEM, adopt more masculine attributes like wearing a suit to be taken seriously. However, she found that when facts are presented as cohesive findings, then adopting male attributes is unnecessary, as people will naturally begin to listen. The scientists on the panel agreed that demonstrating the importance as well as the cost-effectiveness of scientific findings are the most effective method to convey scientific findings to policymakers, which elicits better potential of manifesting effective change. This is especially true if the findings indicate cost savings to the policymaker. However, conveying such information can be inhibited by political divides. The issues women face in the fields of STEM can be mitigated by the support received by colleagues, especially female colleagues, which encourages more women to join STEM as well as science journalism fields. It was determined that educators should emphasize the importance of science in communicating science, particularly by using female scientists as role models to entice young women to consider pursuing STEM and science journalism. Dr. Mubaraka indicated the biggest hurdle that she faced in her scientific career was securing financial backing, particularly in Libya. Thus, based on her experience, the international community can do more to provide access to scientific information and funds to support the younger generation of women who want to get into STEM. More specifically, on a national level, Scientific priorities must be adhered to because of the high cost of conducting science vis-a-vis financial constraints. It was determined there is a need to create a sustainable movement to empower women in science, as well as construct a structured way to disseminate findings to the public. There needs to be a national strategy to encourage women to adopt STEM careers, possibly by highlighting female role models who have achieved success in the fields of STEM. Further, the communication of science and scientific findings needs to be integrated into early education as well as embedded into grants to ensure findings are adequately publicized. Lastly, multiple stakeholders need to be involved in the fields of STEM, particularly in regards to the scientific findings, so that scientific findings can be effectively conveyed to the public. Thank you again for joining.